Good afternoon and welcome back to the Boardroom. As always, for those of you that have watched the show before, you know that we're meeting with some of Malta's best business minds. And today we have two fantastic business minds with us talking about the hospitality industry and specifically our hotels. As always, we are live. So if you'd like to add a comment or a question below, please do. And we will pass them on to our interviewees as part of this conversation. If you don't manage to catch us live, don't worry. You can catch up later on who'swho.mt, Malta's leading business portal. Now, as I had said, today is all about hotels. We're going to be understanding how hotels are coming back into business after COVID-19 and what the plans are for the months ahead. We're very lucky to have two brilliant business minds with us today. They are Winston J. Zahra, CEO of GG Hospitality, and Simon De Cesare, CEO of Eden Leisure Group. Simon and Winston, thank you so much for being with me today on the Boardroom. Great to see you both.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for asking us.
Pleasure. Great to get into a conversation here about hotels. And Winston, I'll come to you first. If you could just give us a brief update of what happened at the start of COVID and how hotels were impacted. Obviously, you're operational in the UK. How did things develop there, being a couple of weeks behind Malta?
Well, I think initially the general population and government in the UK sort of downplayed the overall effect of COVID-19. And in some cases, I think the reaction was a little bit slow. But then when it hit hard, it hit fast. Everything had to close down very quickly. Lockdown came around very quickly. And like everywhere in the world, suddenly we went to a position where everything was shut down. I think, like many other people, I don't know of any other episode, at least throughout my career, where every hotel practically in the world, in every country, had to close down because of this virus. Normally there's a problem in one part of the world or in a particular industry or in a particular country, but this has affected everyone in the same way. You know, they're saying that everyone's in the same storm, not necessarily in the same boat, but in the same storm at the same time, is something which we haven't seen before.
Certainly. And Simon, for the local operation, what were the initial shocks and how did you get over them? Were you expecting early on that you would have to close, or was it something that sort of came to you gradually as an awareness?
I think, as you mentioned, we did sort of lag some of the other countries which were taking some more drastic measures of lockdowns, locking down businesses, and then eventually complete lockdowns. I think we were fortunate enough that we didn't have to go through the complete lockdown, as in people were being forced to stay at home. There was an element of freedom still amongst our societies. However, it was extremely difficult for us as businesses because, I mean, we were trying to plan and forecast for an absolute unknown. I mean, decisions were having to be made without having any idea how bad the crisis was and how long we would have to live through it. We still don't really have that much clarity, but as we are starting to reopen, it's far more clear today than it was back in March, April, when we were having to try and forecast what if we didn't manage to reopen our hotels till next year, till the first quarter or second quarter next year. And trying to think about our survival as a company with no revenues and big payroll costs, and thinking about what we were going to have to do about the salaries and all the people who are depending on us for pays. It was hugely emotionally draining and a very difficult period overall.
Absolutely. And I'll stay with you, Simon, to talk about that just a little bit more. You know, you have a massive team, massive operation, not just in the hotels, but obviously as Eden Group a little bit wider. What did it take to be a business leader in this period and to sort of guide the ship through this storm with such a large team?
It was very difficult. As you said, I mean, we have almost 600 full-time equivalents throughout our entertainment and hospitality industry. Overall, the staff and our colleagues were extremely supportive of the difficult time that we were going through as business owners. They accepted flexibility when it came to doing jobs which were not normally within their normal remit. I think one of the key things was communication, though, being able to communicate directly with all the people within the team to explain to them that our desire is to try and make sure that we're not letting anyone go. We're trying to find ways of getting through this. We will get through this. it's very easy for people to feel very down and emotionally depressed with a situation like this, and hugely insecure about their future as well. Because if they did lose a job with us, it's not like the job market is what it was pre-COVID. The job market has changed significantly. So I think the communication, constant communication is important. Updating them when we did see some positive signs from government in terms of wage subsidies and things like that. And we had a fantastic response from them in terms of accepting some of the harsh realities that we all had to do, whether it was changing shifts or reducing salaries. But all around, it worked. It's worked well so far. Now we're not out of the woods yet.
Absolutely. You talk about communication there, and Winston, I'll come to you. Obviously, you're running a team from Malta with the huge majority of your team being in the UK. You're used to working remotely and obviously moving between different locations. How has it been to take even more of the operation remote?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, Jo, I am used to working remotely occasionally, but when it goes to remotely all of the time, day in, day out, it's different. Ironically, I think the level of communication has increased over the past weeks as we've lived through this, probably because we've all made a bigger effort. We approached this, maybe not surprisingly because of our fellow shareholders, from a football tactical perspective. So we tackled this in a defensive mode to start off with, where we looked after the health and safety of our team and our guests, first of all, looked after and shored up our finances and cash flow, and just made everything sort of in that area, the safeguarding of jobs, sort of really important. Part of the defensive strategy was also supporting the community. And in fact, we've used our hotels as a base for NHS staff during this period. We then moved into the midfield phase, which is the planning phase, and involved a lot of the team on brainstorming sessions and idea generation on how we can make the business stronger effectively through revenue generation, through efficiency, and just through putting together an overall holistic plan of how we can reopen effectively, and what would be a new normal, as everyone is calling it. And now we're preparing for the attack phase and ready to reopen. But just to sort of take on what Simon was saying, the communication of all that has been key. So touching base with everyone, we created systems where we had touch points with every individual, a minimum of once a week, senior team meetings, which happen daily, head of department meetings, which happen very regular, typically weekly, Zoom groups with all the departments, etc. And, communicating is hugely important during a crisis like this, because there is nothing worse than people sitting at home, potentially thinking of the worst, wondering what's going to happen. So we've taken a very transparent approach and kept people informed in an adult to adult way. Our team are not children, they're not kids. You can't treat them like kids. You shouldn't speak to them like kids, in our opinion. So we've had, like I said, very adult to adult conversations, keeping them up to speed with the reality, not trying to invoke fear, but just giving them things as we were seeing them. To a great extent, like Simon said, especially in the early stages, we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know whether this was going to last a month, a year. We didn't know how devastating the virus was going to be on lives, how risky it was, and how easy it was to catch this. So there were a lot of unknowns. And, to a certain extent, we're still paddling upstream with a blindfold, in all honesty. And there's a lot of guesswork. But we're doing it, I think, thoughtfully, calmly, but in a decisive way as well, and trying to basically keep abreast of what's going on by tapping into informed sources, speaking to third parties, our counterparts in the industry and other industries, trying to learn from what others are doing and adopt best practices as best possible. So it's been interesting as well, because we've lived through other crises like SARS, like 9/11, like the economic downturn in 2008-9. But this is different. It just feels bigger. It feels more extensive, and I think the recovery is also going to be tougher. So it's been a big learning process. You referred to leadership, and I guess the biggest thing on leadership is the learning that we've gone through in the past couple of weeks. A real crash course in how to try and handle a crisis like this to the best of our ability.
And in fact, Winston, I'll stay with you on that. A lot of the business leaders we've spoken to over the past few weeks have sort of mentioned that this has been a time for thinking outside of the box, for maybe assessing what was working within the operation, what wasn't working. Perhaps for some, a golden opportunity to do things differently that they can take forward into the future of their operations. Has that been the case for anything for you at GG Hospitality? And what sort of tips would you have to share from that?
No, it's absolutely been an opportunity to sharpen the tools. There's no doubt about that. And what we've done is we've set up a voluntary, we've called it the Game Changer program, with a third-party company who we use for general coaching of our staff and our team members. And through that program, obviously on Zoom, because that's the platform we've been using, we've brought the team together on a very regular basis. They've now created a total of 21 different projects, which they are pitching to the senior team next week, which cover everything from revenue generation ideas to operational efficiency ideas, guest experience ideas, and also team enhancing ideas where we can make things better for the team. So the approach we've taken is we've involved everyone, or those that wanted to be involved at least, and we've spread it across the company. And the ideas coming out, the engagement of the team has been phenomenal. We're really, really pleased with what's coming through. And I think the way it's been done will also get more buy-in when we come to implementing these projects, because they're not projects being driven by senior management. They're projects being driven by anyone and everyone across the team, which is what makes it more fun, more interesting, more engaging.
Absolutely. Simon, has that been the same for you? Has this been an opportunity to rehash the way you do things and discover new ways to do things that are going to be more efficient?
It has. There's a number of things. Obviously, we had time to think and time to develop things. Previously, all of our human resources were completely taken up with just running the day-to-day business. So obviously, an immediate grind to a halt meant that we had to sort of reprioritize and incentivize people to actually start thinking that way. So we've created a number of products which we'll be launching over the next couple of months within the cinema, for example, being able to buy your food and drink online before you actually come to the cinema. So it will actually avoid more payments and transferring of cash. We've moved many of our processes paperless, which was something which I've been trying to do for a long, long time. But we've looked at new IT systems out there and been able to implement them very quickly. So yes, there's been a lot in terms of efficiencies. And then there were a lot of other projects which we wanted to do, but we just didn't have space in the occupancy, because it was a nice problem to have. But now that we're shut, we're flying through refurbishing all of our bathrooms in the hotel. We've done, I think, about 60 or 70 so far, and we've still got another 60 or 70 in the pipeline, which we plan to do over the next 2 to 3 months. We're looking at refurbishment programs within the hotel lobbies. A lot of things that you just can't do when you're operating at full steam.
Absolutely. And we are now sort of having more input from the government about measures that are being put in place to help the economic recovery. Simon, what are your thoughts on what's been announced in the past couple of days?
I think the measures that were announced yesterday were extremely positive. I think they will add a lot of injection of liquidity into businesses and into consumers, which I think will eventually get the economy moving again. But it also inspires. It makes people more confident to actually approach their businesses if they know that they've got a bit more security when it comes to wage subsidies, when it comes to utilities, when it comes to rents. But what we're tackling at the moment are more short-term and medium-term. Even within the hotel industry, we're looking at how to promote and get as many people here as soon as possible to try and get back to our 2019 figures. But what I think we should also be looking at much more is looking at a long-term plan and a long-term strategy. Looking at the tourism industry as a whole to see, who do we want to be attracting? We keep talking about quality. We keep talking about quality product, quality tourists, higher spending people. But all I think we've really been doing it, while we do target to niches, is we still are a mass marketing destination. And we really need to be looking more holistically at what type of tourism product we want to be able to offer and how we want to try and attract the right people over to Malta. This is not a strategy for 6 to 12 months. This is a 3 to 5 year plan. There was a tourism strategy in place from 2015 to 2020, but I don't think there has been a follow-up one done, whereas now is absolutely the perfect time to be looking at that and putting in place measures to be able to achieve that. We now have at least 2 years of very low incoming tourism, a year to 2 years, depending on how quickly the consumer confidence bounces back. And it's a real opportunity to be able to think long-term about our strategy, invest more in our tourism product, whether it's improving the infrastructures, whether it's improving drainage systems, Wi-Fi systems, all sorts of areas of bottlenecks. And having a look at the tourism product in terms of what new hotels are coming out on stream over the next 3 to 5 years. The reality is that if you look at the number of applications at the planning authority for new hotels, it's flabbergasting. I mean, if you had 60% more room stock, which is very, very likely in the next 3 years, if all the hotel beds come to fruition, you'd need about 1.5 million more tourists every year just to remain at the same level of occupancy we are today. I mean, it's just not sustainable, and a long-term thought plan really needs to be looked at in this regard.
Absolutely. I know, Winston, you'll agree with a lot of that. If you were a policymaker right now, Winston, what would you be focusing on? Would it be in line with that? How do we make Malta the quality destination it needs to be?
I mean, look, Joe, I do agree with a lot of what Simon was saying. The reality is the measures taken and announced mainly yesterday. I mean, there have been various measures taken over the past weeks, but yesterday, they are aimed at stimulating local demand. Obviously, the extension of the wage subsidy, the electricity costs, the subsidies towards digital marketing. I think those are all very positive steps and support the industry. But as Simon said, they are sort of relatively short term. If I just put this into context, if you work out, I think, Simon, there are about 40,000 beds, registered beds. Yeah, I think it's still about 40,000. If you work out from now till the end of the year, if those beds had to be fully occupied by the local market, you're talking 7 months, that's about 8.5 million bed nights. Okay, that 400,000 odd people have to fill. Even at 25% occupancy, that means that every Maltese person would have to spend 5 nights in a hotel between now and the end of the year. I'm just trying to put into context sort of the domestic market and the size of the domestic market in relation to the number of beds that would need to be filled. And I'm not even going anywhere near the sort of 4,000 licensed Airbnb and the sort of double that unlicensed Airbnb. I think there are about 9,000 Airbnb licensed and unlicensed accommodation establishments. So the reality is local hotels cannot survive on the local market. There just isn't enough. But yesterday's vouchers, etc., will be an injection of probably around 30 million, I estimate, in immediate demand, which is going to be very much needed and very much welcome. And the multiplier on that will be significant as well. The most important point, though, is I think the one Simon made, is that we do need to decide what we want out of our tourism industry. It's grown significantly. We used to talk about 1.5 million tourists as the kind of, we've reached the mecca of tourism numbers in Malta. We're now at double that. And as Simon said, if the room stock in the pipeline goes ahead, we have to increase that by another 1.5 million. Is it sustainable? I honestly don't think so. When you look around, why do people come to Malta? Do we want them to come to Malta just because it's a relatively cheap destination, or do we want them to come to Malta because it's a special destination? And we have loads of things that are special. You know, when you look at the country, the safety, the proximity to Europe, the language, the history, there's lots. The weather, obviously, but there's lots over there. But we've never really taken the time to sit back and think about what we really, really want. And, you know, I fully agree with Simon. Like we were saying, what have we done as businesses in this period? We've sat back and we've taken stock of our product. We've taken stock of how we do things. We're getting ready to do things differently. And we need to do that as a country. And to be fair, the last 3 months, everyone's been in crisis mode. So there's no way I would expect any government to be sitting down and trying to plan this out long term. But now, as we sort of come out of the crisis and start moving forward, it is time to sit down and really decide. The big challenge is that the infrastructure is now designed for a very large number, and the expectation and the dependence is on a very large number. So it's going to be very difficult to claw that number back in a way that doesn't cause quite a bit of damage to businesses who have set up with expectations of this sort of 3 million tourists a year. We've had 12 years of continual growth in this industry, and now suddenly it's been switched off. It's not the brakes have been put on, it's been switched off. And we need to switch it back on again and build it back up. It is an ideal time to ask ourselves, what do we want to build it up to be? You know, do we want to work back to 3 million tourists? Do we want to work to 5 million tourists? Do we want to claw it back to 2 million tourists? What type of accommodation do we want to provide? What type of experience do we want to provide? Do we want people to come here that spend £100 a night in a hotel, £50 a night in a hotel, or euro? I'm talking English money again. 100 euro in a hotel, or 50 euro in a hotel, or 500 euro per night in a hotel. What are we trying to create by way of an experience that attracts people to this beautiful country of ours? You know, what are we trying? What do we want to do?
I think, irrespective of the actual COVID situation, I think the country and the tourism industry was going very quickly into a brick wall in terms of the experience that we were going to be able to offer. And you see that not even just the experience to our tourists, but you see the way that the Maltese people start treating treating tourists and their feeling towards the tourism industry as being a negative industry, one where it's bringing too many people over, it's congesting their lives, it's having a very distinct and direct impact on everyone's lives in terms of whether it's traffic or whether it's being able to access 2 square meters on one of a few public beaches or something like that. And it is. I think we're very close to our sustainability level as it is, so let alone having to bring in another 1.5 or 1 million or 2 million more people. So it is maybe an opportune time for this thing to have actually put our brakes on. And as Winston said, hopefully now that the airports are starting to reopen, things seem to be starting to normalize, we can start looking a bit more long term rather than the next 3 months, and start stimulating some real discussion and opportunity for change.
But Simon, are we in time? Are we in time to sort of make Malta that sort of jewel destination that focuses on quality, focuses on heritage? Are we still in a position to be able to do that, or has the time passed?
I don't think there's an option. I mean, you can't turn back time. You can just stop it getting worse. So can we be a jewel in the Med? I think it's very difficult. But can we stop it getting worse if we really resolute about it, put our minds together, and have the buy-in of all the stakeholders? Then I think there is a possibility. But I take your point. It is a very difficult thing to unwind something which is already causing quite a bit of stress and dissatisfaction among the populace.
Okay.
Joe, there is an important point here, which very often gets missed in the general conversation about tourism. There has been a massive change, a transformation in the accommodation sector over the past 6-7 years. You know, up to 7 odd years ago, 95% of tourists visiting Malta used to stay in hotels. As this number of visitors has increased, today the percentage of people who stay in hotels is just over 50%, with the other 50% staying in non-hotel accommodation. So, you know, very often the finger is pointed at hotels for this massive growth in numbers. The reality, though, over the last 6-7 years is that the number of hotel beds hasn't really changed. But overall tourist accommodation beds has increased, and people are staying in those non-hotel accommodation beds. Just to exaggerate the point, if the number of tourists to Malta had to fall by half, but those people all stayed in hotels as opposed to non-hotel accommodation, then hotels would remain in exactly the same position that they were pre-crisis. Okay, so there has been this massive change in the type of accommodation provided, where I think we also need to be asking ourselves questions, and I'm not advocating in any way, just so no one gets me wrong, that non-hotel accommodation shouldn't exist. Far from it. I mean, there's space for everyone in the market, but I'm just making a point based on statistics and fact that this has changed the landscape of our industry over a very short period of time.
I think if I can add to that, what we're going to see over the next 6 to 9 months is a lot of casualties in the accommodation industry. You know, whether they're Airbnb or these apartments type accommodation or actual fully blown hotels is yet to be seen. But what's going to happen is, if we're forecasting that next year we'll be looking at 1.3 million tourists, which is 50% of what we have this year, the clients, the tourists are going to be choosing who to stay with. And this is where I think having an international brand really helps. That cleanliness, that promise of cleanliness, that trust, that question of trust in that respect. Intercontinental, for example, have developed internationally a program called the IHG Way of Clean, which is a program developed in hand with key medical and technology companies to ensure the safety of guests and staff. And they've rolled it out amongst all the brands. Coupled with that, they also have a loyalty base of about 100 million customers. So all these people are hearing about how professional and how this brand is looking out for the industry. For the guests and for the clients, and so people are you'll have subpar hotels which will struggle. They will not be chosen. You will have the likes of Airbnb, which we've been having a lot of discussions recently. I feel will struggle compared to collective or hotel accommodation because of the cleanliness promise. I'm not saying that they're not clean. I'm just saying that clients will probably trust an international brand that they know, as opposed to some random apartments that they can rent in Slema. So there's going to be a number of casualties. And so this might be how we can roll back some of the damage that has happened in the past. Again, I'm thinking, much more macro now. 6-9 months time, you'll have a number of people struggling to rent their apartments. They've got home loans on them. It's going to there'll be a struggle for banks and possible foreclosures. Hopefully, a number of the hotels in the pipeline will really relook at the product that they're trying to bring in, because the quality product is going to be one which it's going to trump the non-quality product. Nowadays, people are building hotels with a floor to ceiling height of 2.4 meters, which is what is now allowable at law, but no international brand would allow a hotel with a 2.4 height. I mean, it's too small and wouldn't give the quality perception that any international brand would be happy putting their name and their stamp on. So hopefully there'll be a self-correction because of the COVID situation, but we should also be looking at a policy level as well, and trying to see how to stimulate the right way of doing it. There's a quality, when we're talking about quality, we're not talking about 5-star. There's perfectly good 3-star quality as well, and it's just as needed as 5-star, if not more, if you ask me. But the 3, 4, 5-star quality product is the one which is going to win. Subpar will go down, and I think the apartments will also take a hit.
Of course, Winston, I'll come to you just briefly about sort of the corporate market, which has always been a very important one, Malta and also globally. Do you think that businesses are going to keep traveling as part of this sort of sector, or do you think it's going to be a while until we start seeing the MICE industry improve?
I think it's going to take time, Joe, and it's going to take time for 2 reasons. One, MICE events are typically group events. So, you have MICE groups, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 people, so the grouping and people traveling in groups of that size, I think will take some time to come back. And, many companies are going through very tough times. So budgets will be cut, budgets will be pulled. And typically the type of MICE activity is one of the first to get chopped because people can do without. The third aspect is that people have suddenly got used to communicating like this over the web, online, even in big groups. I mean, we've held sessions of 250 people online very effectively with breakout rooms and breakout sessions. So, is that going to become another competitor? Is Zoom going to be a competitor to the sort of hotel industry for conferences? Quite possibly. And maybe it's only short term until budgets return, but every forum I've taken part in across the industry is of the opinion that this is an 18 to 36 month journey that we're on, and it's not going to be, as much as the lights were turned off 3 months ago, it's not a case of just turning those lights on. The silver lining here is locally, I think that people will also come to appreciate the size, the importance, and the multiplier effect of the tourism industry. Because as that industry has been unplugged, the effect of it is going to be, unfortunately, very, very hard felt in the local economy and on many people locally. So hopefully, this 18 to 36 month forecast is brought down to a much shorter period of time so that people can get back to earning income, businesses can restabilize, and the benefit to the economy is re-injected in the shortest time possible.
Thank you. Simon, anything to add on that one?
No, I tend to agree. I mean, there are liquidity issues, and there are the ease of doing business with Zoom. But I think sometimes we underestimate how important that person-to-person contact is as well within companies, and I think that will eventually it will trump. Now, I mean, maybe you won't have 100% of your business sector jumping into the fray again, but I don't think it will be eliminated. There will always be a need for relationships, whether between supplier and customers, or between employees and colleagues in different countries. I think there'll be a mix. Now, it's true when your economy and your businesses are on overdrive, maybe you'll be a bit more keen to go and spend €500,000 on a conference, and today maybe you wouldn't. But I think I would tend to agree that we're looking at a 2-year plus recovery. But this is why we need to find ways of incentivizing foreign businesses to come to Malta to have their conferences, similar to what we do in the film industry. Granted, this is probably for a shorter period, 4 or 5 days, and probably has less of an injection directly into the country, but it is going to be a very important market for us to be able to incentivize to come over to Malta.
Absolutely. Very sage advice there from you both. Thank you. To wrap up, could I just ask you to share the one key thing that you've learned from this period that perhaps other business leaders up and coming as well perhaps could take from this? Simon, I'll come to you first.
Well, I think the fact that we had to force our lives to grind to a halt should be an eye-opener to everyone, from individuals who are on overdrive to companies who are expecting things to remain as they were. No one could have ever predicted that such a situation with everyone coming to an absolute halt was possible. But hopefully we can learn from this and concentrate a bit more on our quality of life, our work-life balance, all great buzzwords, sustainability of our economy, and also sectors and sustainability of our environment. These are all things which have come out very, very distinctly in this last 2 to 3 months, at least for myself.
Thank you, Simon. Winston?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Simon. I think the general forced slowdown and increased communication with the team has been the biggest benefit that's come out of this. But also what I've seen is a general community spirit, at least in the UK. In the UK, we opened the hotels to the NHS staff, and we've been hosting doctors and nurses who had to isolate away from their families. And the beautiful thing that came out of that was the community spirit that surrounded that initiative. You know, we had companies who wanted to provide food, companies that wanted to provide cosmetics, individuals anonymously dropping off hampers of gifts and food and all sorts of things. And it really created this sense of community, this sense of let's work together to beat this. And I think if you can harness that kind of engagement, that kind of positive energy to drive, it could be a company forward, it could be a country forward. It doesn't really, it's the scale that's different, but the principle remains the same. I think to me that was the most sort of touching thing that came out of this crisis.
Well, thank you very much. Very wise words of wisdom there. Great sentiment as well. Thank you both for being on the show and sharing all of that with us.
Great to be here.
Thank you also to those of you. Thank you also to those of you at home for watching us on the Boardroom. We'll be back on Friday, and we look forward to seeing you then.
Thanks, John.
Thanks. Bye-bye.